On the evening of Tuesday, September 19th, 2017, Andrew Kensington sat on the edge of his worn couch, the dim blue glow of his phone screen lighting up his face for the 100th time. No messages, no missed calls, just the same static silence. By now, Jasmine should have texted. She always did. A quick, sarcastic ping, alive and filthy. Shower or pizza first. But nothing had come through. Not Monday, not Tuesday, and now the quiet felt loud outside. The city moved in its usual blur. Horns. In the distance, neighbors shuffling groceries into elevators. But in Andrew's apartment, time had slowed to something cruel. He unlocked his phone again. No signal issues, no missed pings, just waiting. He told himself she was fine. Told himself she probably took a longer detour. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she found a spot so beautiful she decided to stay an extra night and journal like she used to. But Jasmine wasn't careless. She was methodical, and this trip wasn't a whim. She'd planned it for weeks, pored over maps, triple-checked her route, even laminated the itinerary and stuck it to Andrew's fridge with a magnet shaped like a trout, a leftover souvenir from a family trip long ago. He stared at that magnet now. Andrew stood, restless, pacing the living room like a caged animal, his fingers curled into a fist, then relaxed, again and again. Jasmine was 32, independent, smart. She knew how to handle herself in the wild. She wasn't just any hiker, she was that hiker, the one park rangers admired when she passed by, but still. 5 days he sank back into the couch, head in his hands. The longer the silence stretched, the heavier it felt. Then a memory hit. A quiet moment from 2 weeks earlier, the last hike they did together, a short trail near Jasmine had paused mid-step, staring at the endless green of the Appalachian Mountains, her face lit by something childlike. This place, she had said, I feel like I've been here before. Like the trees remember me. It was the first time Andrew saw that look in her eyes, not just awe, obsession. That night, she'd texted him articles about lost trails and uncharted ridges, said she needed to go back. Alone. At the time, it felt whimsical. Now, it felt like a decision unraveling into fear. He grabbed his phone and scrolled. To her contact, still no message. His thumb hovered, then pressed call. It rang once, then again, then voicemail. Her voice played upbeat, apologetic. Hey, you know what to do. Or don't. Either way, I'll probably call you back from the woods. He hung up. Andrew stood, grabbed the laminated itinerary off the fridge, and sat at his laptop. He typed in the trailhead name. The path was remote, challenging, not for beginners. She hadn't gone in blind, but still, alone. She wasn't supposed to be alone. Originally, Nathan Coldridge was going to join her, a friend from her architectural firm. They'd mapped the route together over lunch breaks. But then came the call. Nathan, his voice hoarse, apologizing. A violent stomach bug. No way he could go. Andrew had begged her to reschedule. But Jasmine had smiled that calm, stubborn smile. I need this, she said. I need to go now. So she went. That was 5 days ago. Now it was Tuesday night. And the silence had a shape, a weight, something dark and absolute. Andrew picked up the phone again, but this time he didn't call Jasmine. He called the sheriff's office. The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. Andrew's wasn't. He gave her Jasmine's full name, age description, the make and model of her car, the exact trailhead, the last known date. She, MESSAGED. Every word was harder to say than the last. Like speaking them made it all more real. The dispatcher told him a ranger would be sent to check the trailhead parking lot. It could take a few hours. Andrew thanked her and then sat still. He didn't move. Not for minutes, not for an hour, not until the phone rang again. It was the sheriff's office. A ranger had just returned from the trailhead. There was one vehicle in the lot, a silver sedan, covered in a thin layer of dust and pollen, parked neatly beneath a large oak tree. Andrew's chest tightened. Is it hers? He asked. There was a pause. License plate matches. The ranger said, it's Jasmine's. The words landed like a blow. She had arrived. She had gone in. But 5 days later, she hadn't come out. The sun rose over the Appalachian wilderness with a pale gray light that didn't feel warm. It felt clinical, distant. A fog hung low in the valleys, clinging to trees like breath that couldn't let go. The parking lot at the trailhead had transformed. What once was a quiet dirt clearing now pulsed with human urgency. White tents, folding tables littered with maps, and the constant murmur of radios. Andrew Kensington stood just outside the chaos. He clutched a photo, one he'd emailed to the sheriff's office the night before. Jasmine smiling wide, her foot propped on a mossy log, bright blue jacket, orange cap, backpack cinched tight. The picture was supposed to be a memory. Now it was a missing persons poster. Search teams moved with purpose. Rangers, deputies, volunteers, trained canine units strained at their leashes, noses low, darting between undergrowth. One deputy approached Andrew and gently asked, "This the jacket?" Andrew nodded. The man squinted at the photo, then pointed at the map spread across the folding table. "We're starting along the north ridge, based on the route she gave you. That's the most logical trail. Don't worry, we've done this before." Andrew gave a tight nod, but inside, everything was unraveling. The first teams went in at dawn, boots crushing leaves, radios crackling with clipped urgent voices. Every now and then, a voice would rise, "Possible trail," or "Fresh footprint here." But it was never her. The forest swallowed them whole. Even with a dozen people shouting her name, the woods answered with silence. Day 2 came. Then 3. New counties sent in backup. Additional rescue teams arrived, some driving hours to help. They brought their own gear, their own dogs, their own hope. The canopy above was so thick that it muted the sun, and from the air, a helicopter circled endlessly, peering down through layers of green with thermal cameras. But the trees were too dense. The sensors saw only endless leaves, no heat signatures. Andrew sat at the edge of the command post, each day eyes hollow, hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee he never drank. Anything he'd ask each returning team, and each time, not yet. He tried to tell himself the same things Jasmine would have said. She's smart. She knows how to handle herself. She's probably off route, waiting for help. But no gear, no prints, no food wrappers. Nothing. It didn't make sense. Even in an accident, hikers leave signs. Jasmine didn't just vanish. It was like the forest had opened up, swallowed her whole, and closed again without a trace. Until day 8, a voice came through the radio, breathless, excited. "Command, we've found something." The entire post froze. A volunteer team deep in a low, swampy section several miles off her original route had spotted a small shred of bright fabric caught on a branch, swaying over a muddy creek bed. Turquoise blue. Andrew's breath caught. It was the same blue as Jasmine's jacket. Frank Miller, the lead ranger, looked up from the map. "That's her color," he muttered. "Get the dogs over there now." They redirected to canine units immediately. Helicopter eyes moved overhead. Forensics were prepped. Andrew gripped the photo tighter. This was it. This had to be it. The search narrowed, focused, but the area was rough. Dense brush, thorns, sinkholes hidden under leaf cover. Searchers clawed through it for hours, then days. A perimeter was set, every inch combed, but no further sign emerged. Finally, the fabric was brought back in, sealed in an evidence bag. Andrew stood beside Frank Miller as a forensics deputy examined it under a magnifier. The color was right, but the texture wasn't. "It's too heavy," the deputy muttered. "Not jacket grade. This is ... It's from a vest. Nylon, cheaper make." Andrew blinked. The vest. The ranger side. Fishing vest. Older model, sold in bulk at outdoor stores a decade ago. It wasn't Jasmine's. The news dropped like a stone in the center of the camp, too. Days of digging through mud. Hope ... wasted. Andrew didn't say a word. He just turned back toward the photo in his hand. The forest, once again, had given them nothing. Rain came on the 14th day. Not a drizzle, not the kind you feel and forget, but a cold, soaking wall that bled through jackets, boots, and skin. It hammered the canvas tents, filled creeks until they swelled into angry rushing rivers. And just like that, the mountain made its message clear. Time's up. Fog rolled down the ridges like a living thing, cloaking the forest in silence. The hum of radios grew softer. Helicopters were grounded. Searchers began packing up gear slower than they needed to, as if dragging out the final moments might delay what was coming next. Andrew Kensington stood just beyond the gravel lot, hands deep in the pockets of his soaked jacket. His sister's car sat alone, tucked neatly beneath that same oak tree. A soft blanket of pollen, now streaked by rain, clung to its windows like time itself had settled over it. He stepped closer, reached out. His hand hovered above the hood. Didn't touch. It felt wrong, like disturbing a grave. Behind him, tarps flapped. Engines started. Boots sloshed through mud. The search command post, once a flurry of purpose and noise, was collapsing piece by piece. A folding table clattered. As it was tossed into a truck bed, the maps were rolled up. Radios clicked off one by one. Frank Miller, the lead ranger, approached slowly, his hat in one hand, his other carrying a clipboard slick with water. His face was tired, not from the work, but from what he had to say. "We've done everything we can, Andrew," he said quietly. "Covered over 100 square miles. Every route she marked. Every ridge and ravine. There's nothing else we can do safely, not with the weather turning." Andrew didn't answer. He just stared at the windshield. Miller tried again. "This isn't the end. Rangers will stay alert. Files stay open, but the large-scale search is being suspended. Suspended, not closed, not ended." It was a soft word, a mercy word, but Andrew heard what it really meant. She was gone, and they had nothing. No jacket, no boot print, not even a broken branch. Jasmine had disappeared without a trace, as if the mountain itself had reached up and taken her. A few days later, the last trucks pulled away. Volunteers who had once stood shoulder to shoulder in rows slowly faded back to their towns and cities. The command post was gone. And Jasmine's car, still there. Andrew returned every weekend for a month, just stood by the car, left flowers once, a note another time, but the forest never answered by October. The trees had turned. Leaves fell in bursts of red and gold, carpeting the forest floor. In silence, another layer over the trail she may have walked, another barrier between then and now. Winter came, then spring, and the world, slowly, painfully, moved on. Jasmine's apartment was eventually emptied, her plants given away, her job at the architectural firm quietly filled. Andrew kept her books, her hiking boots, and the photo, the one from their last hike, stayed on his fridge, still smiling, still bright, still wrong. A full year passed. Then, in late September 2018, a story broke, small at first. A local report buried beneath headlines. Another hiker, a young woman, solo, found dead in a shallow grave 100 miles south of Jasmine's last known location, assaulted, brutally, left beneath a tangle of underbrush. The details were horrific, and for most, it was a tragedy, a headline, a warning. But for one man, Detective Wallace, part of a cold case unit in the state capital, the story rang louder. The pattern was too close. Same gender, same region, same hiking culture, and Jasmine's file was never far from his desk. He pulled it up, reviewed every line, every report, every inch of blank space. To women, 2 stories. One had ended in horror, the other had never ended at all. He made a decision. The Kensington case, cold, silent, untouched for a year, was about to be reopened. Detective Wallace had read through thousands of cold cases in his career, but something about Jasmine file wouldn't let go. It sat on the corner of his desk like a quiet accusation, not just a missing person report, but an unanswered question that refused to fade. And now, after the discovery of that murdered hiker 100 miles south, the similarities were too sharp to ignore. Both women, both experienced hikers, both traveling solo. Same region, same forest. The second woman had been found, brutalized, buried. But Jasmine, she was still missing. No crime scene, no evidence, no goodbye. Wallace stared at the 2 files side by side. One, a horror story, the other, a blank page, but the setup was identical. He leaned back in his chair and whispered aloud, "What if Jasmine was the first?" It was a terrifying thought. If the killer had learned from the first disappearance, he may have left nothing behind the first time. Wallace began pulling everything, every scrap from the original 2017 case. Interview logs, photos, statements. One name surfaced again and again. Nathan Coldridge, Jasmine's friend, the man who was supposed to hike with her, but cancelled at the last minute. But Wallace reread the original report. Nathan had been sick. Violent stomach bug. Said he went to an urgent care clinic the morning Jasmine left. It checked out at the time. Nobody pushed harder, but now, with this new theory in play, everything had to be revisited. Wallace reached for the phone hours later. He and his partner were sitting in Andrew Kensington's living room. The place was quiet. To clean, the kind of clean that only grief can cause when there's nothing else to control. So you dust. A single photo sat above the fireplace. Jasmine smiling, alive, untouched by time. Andrew listened without blinking as Wallace laid out the new angle. "This might not have been an accident," Wallace said. "We think Jasmine might have been targeted." The words hung in the air like smoke. Andrew sat forward, his hands gripping the edge of the couch. "She was careful," he said softly. "She was smart." "I believe that," Wallace replied. "But so was the other girl. And we know how that ended." Andrew's jaw clenched. "You think it was the same guy?" "We don't know yet. But we're going to find out." The next morning, Wallace met Nathan Coldridge at a small cafe near his apartment. Nathan looked different from his 2017 interview photo. Thinner, tired, haunted, tired, haunted. He shook Wallace's hand with a weak grip. I've thought about her every day, he said. They sat. Coffee was poured. Neither drank it. Wallace watched Nathan closely as he recounted the timeline. Again, he and Jasmine had planned the trip for weeks. They shared route maps, booked time off work. Then, the day before, Nathan got sick. He cancelled. I didn't think she'd still go, he said. I begged her not to. Did you go to the clinic? Wallace asked. You said you were treated. Nathan nodded. Urgent care on Pine Street. For fluids. Doctor said it was food poisoning. Wallace slid a paper across the table. A medical release form. Nathan signed it without hesitation. His hands shook, but his eyes never wavered. Wallace stared at him if he was lying. He was doing a damn good job. Back at the station, Wallace pulled the clinic records. 10:15 a.m. September 14, 2017. Nathan Coldridge checked in. Diagnosis: acute gastroenteritis. 4 fluids administered. Payment made by credit card. The attending physician's notes were detailed, including visible signs of dehydration that couldn't easily be faked. Nathan had been telling the truth. He wasn't with Jasmine, and he hadn't sent anyone else. There was no scam, no insurance policy, no financial benefit. He was just a man with a lot of guilt, and no way to take it back. Wallace closed the file slowly. The theory of a friend orchestrating something dark. It was compelling but wrong. Still, something had changed. The case, no longer smelled like an accident. It smelled like intent. Too many similarities, too much silence, too clean, and sometimes, too clean is worse. Jasmine Kensington's file was no longer just a missing person report. It was now reclassified. Suspected foul play. And somewhere out there, if this was right, was someone who knew exactly what happened to her, and how to make someone disappear without a trace. It was October 2023, a crisp Saturday deep in the Appalachians, the kind of day where the air smells like pine needles and distant rain. 3 men stood on the slope of a mountain few had touched. In decades they weren't hunters, they weren't hikers, they were part of a small, obsessive group of amateur geology enthusiasts who called themselves the Appalachian Geological Survey, a fancy name for what was really a passion project built on curiosity and weekend road trips. Marcus led the group, a 40-year-old former IT guy turned hobbyist explorer. Clipped to his vest was a black handheld device, an advanced EMF detector, used for picking up electromagnetic pulses. For hours it had been quiet, a low, steady hum, the usual background static of the Earth's magnetic field. But then, its CHIRPED. Marcus stopped mid-step. The screen on his device lit up. 20:45. 60. He stepped left. The signal dropped. Stepped right. It spiked again. Hey, something's here, he muttered. Ben and Leo, the other 2, joined him. There's nothing up here, man. No power lines, no stations, just trees. Marcus stared at the device. The numbers peaked at 87 milligauss, concentrated within a 5-foot radius. Outside that, nothing. This wasn't natural. They started clearing the ground, brushing aside leaves and years of debris. That's when they found it. Not a cave entrance. Not in the way you imagine. It was a fissure, a jagged crack in the earth, maybe 3 feet wide, hidden beneath an ancient, overturned tree. Cool air breathed from the opening, damp and steady. Marcus hovered the EMF detector over the edge. Still 87, locked in whatever was causing the signal. It was coming from inside. The 3 men exchanged a look. They knew this was bigger than they'd expected. Marcus was the most experienced climber. He clipped into a harness, anchored it to a thick root, strapped on his headlamp, and began lowering himself into the darkness. The initial 10 feet were tight, rock scraping against his jacket, but then, it opened. He was hanging in the air, above a massive underground chamber. The light from his headlamp vanished before it touched the bottom. Just black, endless black. He swept the beam across the walls, glistening rock, slick with moisture. Then he spotted something far below, a splash of color, a blue shape, a lump, a second object nearby. Fabric, maybe a sleeping bag. Something else beside it. Looks like camping gear, he called up. Old, maybe. Could be a miner's camp. He stayed a minute longer, then slowly climbed back up. When he surfaced, the look on his face had changed. There's stuff down there, he said. But that's not where the signal's coming from. They ran the EMF detector around the edges of the fissure again. It spiked near a dry alcove in the rock wall. Chest high. Marcus reached inside, and his fingers hit plastic. He pulled out a walkie-talkie, weathered, dirty, but intact. It was still powered on. They stared at it for a moment, then Marcus reached into his pack, pulled out a satellite phone, and dialed 911. An hour later, sheriff's deputies arrived. Then came more state police, rescue specialists, and eventually, Detective Wallace. When Wallace stepped out of his vehicle, he was calm, controlled, but his pulse quickened the second he saw the radio. "Where exactly did you find this?" he asked. Marcus pointed to the crevice, right in there, chest height, jammed between the rocks. The radio was sealed in an evidence bag. It didn't look like much, just an old, standard, two-way model. But to Wallace, it screamed. He turned toward the fissure. "Show me the gear," he said. A specialized rope team was brought in. They rappelled down, carefully. Their headlamps cut through the darkness. At the bottom they found it, a sleeping bag, blue, a backpack, beige, weathered, dusty, but intact. One of the rescuers radioed up. Visual confirmed. No body. That phrase echoed through everyone standing above. No body. The items were retrieved slowly, carefully, and when they were brought into the daylight, Wallace stared at the backpack. A patch on the strap, a patch Andrew Kensington had described 6 years earlier. It was Jasmine's 6 years missing, and now her pack was sitting at the bottom of a hidden pit, in the middle of nowhere. But no Jasmine. Back at the lab, a forensics tech named Sarah opened the walkie-talkie. Its casing was scratched. The battery compartment showed corrosion, but something was wrong. When she hooked it to a diagnostic tool, she got a power reading. Not dead. That was impossible. A standard lithium battery left in a device for 6 years would have died long ago. She checked the make, model, and voltage decay. Ran tests. Then she ran them again. Her results were clear. This walkie-talkie hadn't been transmitting for 6 years. It had likely been placed in that rock wall in the spring or summer of 2022, 18 months ago. Wallace stared at the report, in silence. If Jasmine's gear was from 2017, but the radio was from 2022, that meant one thing. Either Jasmine, or someone who had her radio, had been alive 18 months ago. This wasn't just a cold case. This was active, and whatever happened in that cave was far from over. The descent into the earth was slow, methodical, and absolutely silent, except for the soft clinks of metal and breath through radios. 2 members of the cave rescue team, harnessed and helmeted, began their drop into the fissure where Jasmine's gear had been found. 60 feet down, their headlamps sliced through the black. What they saw was not chaos, it was eerie, peaceful. Jasmine's sleeping bag lay open, dust-coated but unmistakable. Next to it, a large beige backpack, partially unzipped. Nothing around it looked disturbed. No blood, no torn fabric, no bones. Just stillness. They confirmed what the photos had already hinted at. There was no body, but that wasn't the end of it, because Jasmine's backpack, the one she left with 6 years ago, was here, and everything else she brought wasn't. The search team fanned out, sweeping the cavern walls with beams of light. The floor was jagged, uneven, broken in places like old volcanic rock, but toward the far edge of the pit, something else, a narrow tunnel, low damp. The team called it in. Wallace, who stood above with a radio pressed tight to his ear, gave a single word: go. Crawling on hands and knees, the rescuers followed the tunnel. It bent twice, sloped downward, then widened into a chamber, and that's where they found it. A circle of stones, blackened, charred. Ash, packed inside the ring. Beside it, sticks, several sharpened at the ends, hardened by fire, and bones, tiny, brittle, fragile bones, scattered near the fire. Rabbits, squirrels, birds. This wasn't debris, this wasn't garbage, this was survival. Someone had hunted, cooked, lived. In this chamber, in the dark, alone. The team marked the site, logged coordinates, and carefully bagged what they could. But as they moved further, they found something that changed everything. A second exit. About a half-mile from the original fissure, a sloping, walkable passage. No climbing gear required. No ropes. It was wide, and led to a concealed opening in the surface, tucked into a hollow, overgrown with moss and leaves. From the outside it looked like nothing, just another curve in the forest floor. But from inside, it was salvation. Wallace stood at the edge of that hidden entrance, staring into the darkness. His mind reeled. If Jasmine had found this exit, she could have walked out. No need to climb, no need to risk anything. She could have left. So the question became ... Why didn't she? Why hadn't she returned to the surface, to her life, her brother? And the biggest question of all, was it because she couldn't, or because she didn't want to? Wallace ran the possibilities again and again. Maybe she was injured. Maybe she lost her flashlight, couldn't find her way back to the radio. Maybe she survived long enough to hunt, to heal, but never long enough to reach that second exit. But none of it explained the timing. The radio had been placed there not 6 years ago, but barely 1.5. That wasn't an accident. That was intentional. Someone, Jasmine, or someone else had been back here recently. The cave wasn't just a place she had fallen into. It had become her shelter, her prison, her home. But if she'd escaped, why had she vanished again? Wallace looked up toward the sky through the opening above the pit, the same one Jasmine had likely stared at. It was just a crack, a fracture in the rock. But now it felt like something else, a mouth, and the mountain was still holding its breath. The theory wasn't just a hunch anymore. Detective Wallace stood before a whiteboard covered in pinned maps and a handful of printed photos, all centered around one woman, Jasmine Kensington, piece by piece. The picture was coming into focus. She didn't die in that fall. She survived. They believed it. Now she must have hit bottom hard. Injured, maybe broken, but not enough to kill her. She had the pack, the sleeping bag, some supplies. And if she made it through the first few nights, then instinct took over. She hunted, cooked over fire, learned to use what the cave gave her. But the most chilling part, the gear proved she didn't just survive a few days. She lived in that darkness long enough to adapt somehow. She must have discovered the second exit, the easy way out. But the radio, the only thing that could have signaled help, had been left behind, jammed in a crevice near the first dangerous entrance. If she had escaped through the second opening, there was no way she could have found the radio again without light or memory of how to retrace her steps. So she left it, and she walked away. Then, a miracle. Wallace was at his desk when the call came. A local man named George Petrie had been reviewing trail cam footage from his private land near the forest's edge, something he did once a year. Most of the clips were routine, deer, bears, raccoons, but one was not. August 14, 2022, 4:52 a.m. night vision. The clip was short, just 15 seconds. A woman walking down an old logging path, thin clothes tattered, hair long and matted but moving purposefully as she passed directly in front of the camera. She turned her head slightly, reacting to the faint click of the shutter. The light captured her profile for just a few frames. Cheekbones, jawline. Wallace's blood ran cold. He knew that face. It was Jasmine Kensington. 18 months after. The radio was likely placed. She was alive. On foot, moving toward a road. Wallace called Andrew himself. They sat side by side in the precinct's media room. The grainy footage played on loop. At first, Andrew couldn't breathe. Then his hands shot to his mouth. He whispered one word, Jasmine. She was gaunt, no doubt from years of survival, but it was her. The walk, the eyes, the face he'd seen every night in his dreams. Alive, the path she walked led to a state highway just 5 miles further on. 5 miles, that was it. One turn, one car, one person. That's all she would have needed. But no one reported seeing her. No one remembered a lone woman, barefoot and bruised, walking along the shoulder of that road. And there were no more sightings after that. Wallace and his team canvassed every diner, truck stop, gas station, and trailhead for 30 miles. They posted flyers with a still from the video, asked questions, ran her name. Nothing. No one picked her up. No one claimed to have spoken to her. No one helped. It was like she stepped out of the forest and then vanished again. Only this time, not into trees or stone, but into thin air. Detective Wallace had seen a lot in his years. Missing kids, cold trails, quiet killers. But this case felt personal now. It gnawed at him because Jasmine Kensington hadn't just disappeared once, she'd done it twice. And this time, it felt even worse. The trail cam footage from August 2022 was the last known glimpse of her. 15 seconds of grainy movement, 5 miles from the road, and then nothing. They had a time, a place, a direction, but no footprints after that. No dropped items, no sightings, no vehicle footage, nothing. Wallace put together a new map, a giant one. They canvassed everything within a 30-mile radius from that path. Every truck stop, every backroad diner, every gas station that had an outdated CCTV camera half pointed at the parking lot. Flyers went up again. Same face, same eyes, but this time, not missing hiker. Now it just read, "Have you seen her? August 2022. Some people called in false leads. A woman with similar hair. A woman who turned out to be passing through from out of state." Nothing stuck. 1 week became 2, then a month, then 6. Wallace didn't stop, but something in him shifted. Maybe she had been picked up. Maybe she accepted a ride and didn't make it to the other side. Or maybe, and this was the theory that hurt the most, she chose not to be found. After 6 years of survival, what if she didn't want to come back? What if the world she returned to felt less familiar than the darkness she escaped? There were no bank records, no online activity, no bus tickets, no cell phone. But that kind of clean disappearance doesn't just happen. Not unless it's intentional. Andrew Kensington visited the trail path where the camera had caught her. He stood there for a long time. The woods were still, quiet. The camera had been taken down, but he could feel it, the exact spot she passed. He looked down the path toward the highway. She had been so close. 5 miles. That's all she needed. 5 miles and maybe one car. One voice saying, "Hey, are you okay?" But it didn't come. He pressed a small photo of her against a tree trunk, taping it there. He whispered, "You are almost home." And then he walked away. 2 more months passed. 18 months now since the footage. The case had gone still again. But then, a voicemail landed in Wallace's inbox. No caller ID. Just a voice, gravelly, nervous, masked. "I think I saw that woman. The one from the news. She was at the truck stop near Ridgemount. Off exit 89, looked like hell, real skinny. She was asking for directions. Then she was gone." Click. Wallace sat frozen for a second, then he replayed it. Again, then a third time. Ridgemount, exit 89. That was 23 miles east of where Jasmine had last been seen. And the tip, it was the first one that matched. In a year and a half, they weren't done yet. Not even close. I don't know what's worse, losing someone all at once, or losing them in pieces, year after year without an ending. My sister, Jasmine Kensington, vanished once in 2017, but she disappeared again in 2022 after surviving the impossible. Most people know her now as a headline, a trail cam photo, a silhouette walking out of the woods at dawn, but that's not who she was. She was brilliant, relentless. She loved the way the wind sounded in the trees. She used to say, "The wilderness doesn't lie to you, it's quiet, but honest." And maybe that's what drew her into those mountains in the first place. But the mountains didn't lie to us. They just kept her secret. After the anonymous tip in Ridgemount came in, detectives searched everything. The truck stop, the security footage, the nearby bus terminal. But once again, no trace. It was like chasing vapor. The last footage we had, Jasmine's face caught by an old trail cam, still plays in my head, not because of the way she looked, but the way she moved, tired, starving. Still walking, still moving toward something. And then, nothing. That's how her story ends, with nothing, no final text, no body. Just silence. But the kind of silence that hums. The kind you can feel in your chest. In the months after, I started collecting everything: news clippings, police recordings, forensics reports, even the low-resolution still from that grainy video where her eyes for just a second seemed to glance directly into the lens. I'd pinned it all to a board in my garage, tried to build some kind of timeline, but it wasn't a line, it was a spiral. Everywhere I looked, I ended up back where it began, the fissure at the crack in the ground, where they found her sleeping bag, her packed at her radio, the place where she should have died, but didn't. A few weeks ago, I went back there, just me. The entrance was still marked off by yellow tape and a rusted sign that read "No trespassing, ongoing investigation." But no one was there, no officers, no search teams, just trees. I brought flowers, not because I thought she was dead, but because, I don't know, some part of me wanted her to know I hadn't stopped looking. I laid them near the edge, the same rock wall where the walkie-talkie had been wedged, still haunted by the fact that someone, maybe Jasmine, had placed it there, a year before we ever found it. But walkie had broadcast a signal for 18 months. 18 months that she was alive that long, maybe longer, and the only thing I know for certain is, she wanted to be found at least once, but after that, I'm not sure. Sometimes, I think she's still out there, somewhere deep in the pines, watching, not lost, just choosing not to return, because after 6 years alone in the dark, surviving, rebuilding, becoming something else, maybe, the world she left didn't feel like home anymore. Maybe she wasn't hiding from us, maybe she was protecting something, or someone, or herself, I don't know. All I know is this: Jasmine Kensington didn't vanish. She transformed, from sister to survivor, to ghost, and the mountains. They didn't bury her, they became her. Still, quiet, unfathomable. And if she is still out there breathing, watching, waiting, then maybe one day she'll return. But until then, her story ends not with a scream, not even with a whisper, just silence. The kind only the Appalachian Mountains know how to keep.